All righty. So the time is now 10:02. We'll go ahead and get started so we don't keep you from your time. Welcome everyone. If you're able, if you could please turn your cameras on so we can see your lovely faces, and that way we can get used to everyone. My name is Ebony Russ. I'm the program manager for the Placement and Residential Licensing Unit. We do also have our Assistant Director, Don Jeffrey, participating by Zoom. There she is, and several other members of our team. Today, we will have two guest speakers for today. First, we will have a short presentation from Ms. Elizabeth Northcutt, and I believe she's having a little bit trouble of speaking today, so she may have someone presenting for her. After that presentation, we will have another presentation from Ms. Audrey Freshwater. She's an expert in trauma-informed practice, and so we're excited to have them both. So now, if you don't mind, I'll turn it over to Ms. Northcutt and her team. Please feel free to go ahead, and if I need to make anybody else a co-host, just let me know.
Thank you, Ebony. My name is Katherine Mcdermott. I am on the team with Elizabeth. She is having some trouble with her voice today, well, for the past month or so. So I will be doing the presentation today. Liz, if you want to go ahead and screen share, that'd be great.
Okay, you should be co-hosts.
Miss Russ, I'm unable to share my screen. It says it's disabled by the host.
Just a second. Okay, so let's try that.
There we go. Wonderful. All right, so my name is Katherine Mcdermott, and I work for a company called Affinity Empowering, and we're a general life sciences and healthcare company. We provide lots of different types of testing to many different institutions across the U.S. But right now, what we are presenting to you guys is something called Operation Expanded Testing. And Liz, if you want to go to the next slide. And what this is a program offered by the Department of Health and Human Services in actually conjunction with the Department of Defense. So it's a federal program, and it's to offer, it originally started to offer free COVID testing for K through 12 schools and a few other qualifying organizations. But recently we've expanded to offer completely free COVID testing to daycares and other child care facilities as well. So we just wanted to hop on here today to explain a little bit more about this and just present it to you guys and see if this would be anything that could help any of your organizations. So essentially what this is, it's again, a completely free program. It's funded through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, so a federally funded program. And it's to provide, completely free COVID testing to various institutions, different nonprofits. We've really expanded. We're going into homeless shelters now too, any sort of congregate setting. And so right now, obviously, we're expanding to daycares, and it's something that can be very helpful because we can not only test the students and the children in daycares, but we can test staff, and we can also test family members and siblings of anyone in a daycare as well. So Liz, if you want to hop to the next slide real quick. Awesome. So just to get a little more into the specifics, and I would be happy after this presentation, we'll give you all of our contact info, and I can be happy to go into much greater detail. But just to give you a basic overview, what this is, again, federally funded. So we provide all of the coordination for it, all of the supplies that you'll need, all of the testing, the platform to do all the testing, all the supplies that you will need. And then you just have to have a person to do the physical test. So participation and setup is very, very easy. Dawn says she's losing sound. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So yes, again, we provide all of the logistics, all the coordination, all of the back end support for it, and you just need someone to do the physical swab. So for any child over 3 years of age, any adult can provide can do the swab. It's not the super high up the nose brain tickler one. It's just the very base of the nose, super easy 1, 2, 3 swab. So any person over 18 can perform the test for any child over 3. For any children under 3, we do require that a certified medical personnel perform the test. It doesn't have to be a registered nurse, a full-on registered nurse. Lots of different people qualify as quote unquote medical personnel. So if that's something that you would need to utilize, we can provide you with like the full list of who qualifies as a medical personnel. But that's just for children that are under 3. And so how it works, again, we provide you all the supplies. And so you have these different little testing kits. And again, if you're interested in participating, we can go into more detail about exactly how it works. We do a full training and everything to show you guys how to do it all. But you have little, testing swabs, and you just do 2 tests in each nostril for each child. You send it off to a lab. We do this testing, and then within 24 to 48 hours in our online system, all of those results pop back up. And this is the full almost 100% accurate PCR testing. This is not the rapid antigen test that can come back within like an hour. Those have been shown to be up to new studies, just as recent as last week showed that those can be up to 50% inaccurate for any asymptomatic individuals. So this is the extremely accurate, the extremely sensitive PCR testing. And we've really fine-tuned our systems that we really do get results back within 24 hours. So it's still very quick and it's much more accurate than the antigen testing. So Liz, if you want to hop to the next slide. So getting started is super easy. Again, this is the contact information here is sort of the basic info. Liz and I will also both pop both of our emails and both of our direct lines into the chat of this Zoom right after we finish presenting. But, and so if you're interested, please feel free to either contact this general line or contact either of us directly. It's super easy. The enrollment is very easy. You just call one of us, we start to set you up, we send you the supplies immediately, we get you set up in our online system, we set you up with a dedicated team of people to, help you through the entire process. And what's great about it is we can really customize, your testing needs to, whatever the individual organization's needs are. So we can test once a week, we can test sort of ad hoc as needed. We can test, once every 2 days, or we can test once a month. So really just, whatever your organization needs, if you have a child, who has been showing up to daycare for 3 days and then test positive, through like a CVS test, we can sort of get you set up to do a test the next day to test anyone that child has been exposed to. So you really can customize it to what your organization wants, what you guys need, and what fits in best with, how you're running. So very customizable. We can change it sort of as the program goes on, based on, how things work out. So, we really can fine tune it to each different facility. So again, we will pop our info in the chat, and I just want to reiterate that this is completely free to you. There are no, hidden costs at all. You will have no payment whatsoever throughout this whole process. So again, it's just sort of a really great thing that's being offered by the federal government that we're hoping people are going to take advantage of. So thank you for your time. And Liz and I, again, we will pop both of our emails and both of our personal direct contact info into the chat so you guys can get in touch if you're interested in taking part or learning more info. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you again for your participation and providing that wonderful presentation to us. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and we will get them to her. But if not, we will move forward with our next presenter, Ms. Audrey Freshwater.
Thank you, Ebony. Let me see if I can share my screen. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Audrey Freshwater. I'm so excited to be here today. I am a therapist by trade, and worked for the division for a few years, and they will always be home to me. I miss them every day. But my background is really in trauma and working with children. For 11 years, I was directly in the field working with kids. I was an investigator, removed children, placed children, and worked in the court system. And then for the past 3 years, I have been not as in the field, but still continuing the work. And this is something I'm extremely passionate about. I love talking about it. My family makes fun of me because they say if I could talk about the brain 24/7, I would, and they don't find it as exciting as I do. But I'm betting that all of you on the phone understand and know the importance of this. I do a lot of speaking to educators, a lot of training, with educators and other people. But for you all, all of the children that you're working with are coming to you guys with having experienced trauma, or you're working with staff who are working directly with them. And as someone who investigated child abuse and neglect for a number of years, and for me, like, those are my kids, right? Like, those kids that people say are hard to love are the kids that I kind of run to. And so today we're going to talk about. Oftentimes, I feel people say to me, like, I just don't know what to do. And you may have staff who say that as well. And sometimes you yourself may feel that way. I think it's so important for all of us who work with children who have experienced trauma and adversity. And we're all going to, no matter what field we're in, but certainly for you all, understanding that, these are children that are coming to you who have experienced horrific things and whose brain architecture has been disrupted. And so I always think about it like building a house. When you have a really strong foundation, you can do repairs, you can get in and do good work, and it doesn't cost you as much and it doesn't take as long. But when you have a rocky foundation, when you don't have that solid foundation we all need for healthy development, it can really be a high cost to get in and do good work. And it can really, it's not just behaviors, it can really create an impact to overall health and well-being. And so I know when I was working with children in this arena, oftentimes they'd gone without adequate therapy, or even just they'd gone without encountering professionals who really understood this work, and people who it really lived in their bones. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over like what are adverse childhood experiences, because many of you on this call, or all of you probably know about the ACEs study that involved the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. And, a lot of things have been built upon this research study. A funny story, when I was an investigator, I was also in grad school getting my master's in clinical psychology, and I thought I was groundbreaking. I went to my professor and I said, oh my gosh, I've been tracking behaviors of children, and I've also been including information from their parents about their childhoods. And, I really think I'm onto something here. And my professor said, I think you might need to go research this study and then get back to me. And I was really blown away that at that time, I had a bachelor's degrees in social work and psychology, and was, 2 years into my master's program, and did not know about this study. So it was published in 1997. And like I said, this is where this work really stems from, and it's really grown significantly from there. The initial ACEs questionnaire that was done really covered these concepts you see, or these things you see on your screen: abuse and neglect, and household dysfunction as well. What we now know is that there's really no way to fully capture adversity and trauma. What is adverse or traumatic for me is not adverse or traumatic for someone else. And also the impact can vary. I had children who if given the ACEs questionnaire, would have a 9. They had experienced a lot of trauma, and they would not be exhibiting behaviors that would lead you to believe that. However, I worked with children who had experienced, less trauma on that scale, who were having some really big behaviors. And so it's important that we understand that all behavior is communication, and that how we experience trauma and adversity is going to be different. But it also matters when you experienced it and who was there to buffer that response. And like I mentioned, these are just the Philadelphia ACE study questionnaire. They expanded upon this. And so you'll see on there that, things like witnessing violence, living in poverty, those types of things, bullying, foster care, racism, are all on there. And then this is just a graphic of that study from the CDC and Kaiser, the ACEs study, and the number of ACEs that the participants experienced before age 18 that were in that study. And I like to talk about this too, because the individuals who were in that study were primarily white males. And they also were part of the study because it was done with those who had insurance. And so I think that's important, because oftentimes we can reduce this or minimize it. And trauma does not discriminate, neither does adversity. And we are all, working towards the same end, so to speak. And so we're going to experience things and hard things. I don't necessarily think that right now we're seeing just all of these children who have experienced typical child abuse and neglect. I think what we're seeing is children who have experienced, divorce, parental incarceration, mental health, a pandemic, our education system, things that are not developmentally appropriate, like that impact our brain's development. But we know that if what we saw from that study resulted in the results that they did, that with individuals who are Caucasian and male, and had insurance, imagine for other people. And so I like to include this graphic just to touch back on that. So I talked about building a house. This is really, I use this graphic often because to me, it just really hones in on why that healthy child development is so important, because each of these pillars cannot be built upon a shaky foundation. And when they are put up, they don't do so well. They have cracks in them. Sometimes they fall over, but this impacts us all. It's not just our early childhood providers or our school systems or our residential placement, our foster care or foster parents. This impacts everyone. It impacts our economy. It impacts our, individuals becoming responsible citizens, impacts lifelong health, and strong communities. And so, this is information that we all need to feel a sense of urgency to educate others on and to push for change on, but most importantly, to let it really navigate or really show us how we interact with children. And so there really are 4 core concepts I want to talk about, and that's brain architecture, serve and return, toxic stress, and then resilience. So brain architecture is, like I said, it's how the brain is built over time. And we know that the early years are so important, and a strong foundation in those early years improves the odds for positive outcomes. And the same can be said for a weak, likewise, a weak foundation increases the odds of later difficulties. So a lot of the children that you all are working with are really, I would say all of the children you're working with have likely not had the best start in life. And they've experienced things that their brains have wired around. Oftentimes this is why I'm passionate about, our residential treatment centers should be the best of the best when it comes to dealing with trauma, when it comes to, down to the simplest of tasks, but every interaction with those children is a chance for change. It's a chance to show them something different, to be something different for them. Because I feel like we are all worthy of love and belonging. And some children will ask for love in the most unlovable ways. And that might not make them any less worthy of having that. And so brain architecture is really what supports that lifelong learning and behavior and health. And then serve and return, which oftentimes we talk about it in a sense of babies, right? Young children seek that interaction through babbling, and it's a dance that goes on. This also is important, and it continues to be vital in adolescence, and it reinforces that brain architecture and helps to build resilience. With children who have experienced trauma, oftentimes that dance didn't happen in early childhood. And so again, that the brain has been wired around those early childhood experiences. And I would say too, that as adults, we continue this dance. We don't necessarily recognize it. But if you really think about interactions that you have, whether it's with a spouse or a family member or friends, this serve and return kind of interaction, this dance still continues, even into adulthood. So not all stress is bad. Oftentimes when I give these presentations, people will say, so does this just mean we need to grow up in a bubble and never experience stress? Absolutely not. Short stressful events like meeting new people, or maybe a presentation or starting school, these are, necessary for healthy brain development. They prepare us for our brains and our bodies to handle stressful events later on in life. And then there's tolerable stress. And these are those unavoidable events, like a pandemic, a natural disaster, loss of a loved one. And the biggest thing is that there's a supportive caregiver there. There is someone to buffer the stress response. And these events, therefore, are not long lasting, or they won't do long lasting damage. And when we think about toxic stress, it's ongoing, it's repeated. It is abuse or neglect that is bad for brain development. But the biggest thing is it lacks that buffer. There's no one there to help buffer that stress response. And those stress hormones will damage the developing structures of a child's brain. And so when that happens, there is increased vulnerability for mental health problems, for physical problems, and certainly for, oftentimes behaviors that we see. Another question I get often is, well, what is resilience and how do we foster that? I don't believe that resilience is something you either have or don't have. I think that there are certain temperaments. I had a colleague once explain it in flowers, like some children are dandelion children and they will thrive and grow anywhere. Some children are more like lilies. And then you have my favorite children, and those are the roses, and often they are covered in thorns, but behind those thorns is the most beautiful flower, in my opinion. And I think that, and I'm sure there are many more, but that's kind of how I think about it when I think about different temperaments and how that plays into not just trauma and adversity, but just how we handle everyday life. But in order to foster resilience, children need to be safe from physical and emotional harm. Children need routines, consistent people and places, and they need nurturing. They need that sensitive care that encourages our development. And no one needs that more than the children that you all are working with, no matter how old they are when they come to you. And so in order to mitigate the adversity that's associated, I have on here with COVID-19, but this is with trauma and adversity of any kind, it's important that we move that fulcrum. We want to put more positive in, and that is what will help foster resilience, not just out of the pandemic, but just out of experiencing trauma, neglect, and adversity as well. I have this slide on here because oftentimes we are so focused on the academics with children. And I like to talk about this because when we, Forbes magazine and Business Journal do a lot of research yearly about this, and they continue to put out, these are the things we need. These are the job skills that we need, and none of them require high level academic capacity. They are all social, emotional, and relational. Complex problem solving, creativity, being able to, have judgment and decision making, that emotional intelligence. These are skills that children need in order to be successful in life. And one of my other favorite things to talk about is humanity, and compassion too. So I'm super grateful that trauma-informed care, trauma-informed practices are really something that, there's kind of a buzz around them the last few years. Because 14 years ago, when I first did my first training on this, and I started out, there was not a lot of talk about this. There wasn't a lot of training going on. And now that there is, I'm very grateful for that. But I also think that with that, if we don't have a deeper conversation, it can actually do harm to the work. And what I mean by that is this kind of work, this is for everyone. This is for all of us on the call. This is for everyone in our lives. Absolutely for children who have experienced trauma. Absolutely for children who experienced extreme adversity or any adversity. This is a compassion-informed approach. Connection is vital. All behavior is a form of communication. And if any of us think that as adults with fully developed brains that we don't behave in ways that is communicating something to others, we're wrong because we absolutely do it, and our brains are fully developed. Compassion is necessary, and reckonings are inevitable. And so, we're all enduring the storm together, but we do have different boats, and some of us don't have a boat at all, and we're navigating uncharted waters. And the pandemic has really added to that, and it's brought a lot of things to light that were a need, but maybe we didn't recognize that. I love Dr. Bruce Perry. He's one of my favorites. And he says that the research on the most effective treatments to help child trauma victims, might be accurately summed up. And he says that the best thing is that anything that increases the quality and the number of consistent, caring, and positive relationships in the child's life. Therapy is great. Great therapy is much, much needed for our children that we're working with. But the biggest thing is having individuals who understand what trauma is, how the brain develops, and what is needed. And those consistent, caring, and positive relationships in a child's life. When I work with children, I may see them an hour a week or every other week. It's so important that in all of those other hours that child has those consistent, healthy, positive relationships, and anything that increases that. And so I feel like when it comes to, placements, you all have such a huge opportunity to change things for children. You have the opportunity to change a child's trajectory in life, and that is powerful. These children are there for a reason. They are there because placements have failed, or because whatever behaviors they are exhibiting require that. But they are there for a reason. And you all have the opportunity to get in and do such good work and to really show the world that this is how you operate with children. This is in the best interest of children, and to change their life, to help them break the cycle, to show them that what love really looks like, what healthy parenting looks like. And I just think that that is such a powerful gift that you can give to them. Even when it's hard, and trust me, I know that it is hard. But connection really begins with the adults in the building, with educators, with therapists, with support staff, whatever, whoever is in that building. That's where it begins. Connection is biologically imperative. We've lost a lot of connection because of the pandemic. But I would say that before that, we have been disconnected. We don't have our village anymore. We didn't understand the value of that. Oftentimes with children who have experienced abuse and neglect, they've never had a village. They don't know what it feels like to feel safe and protected with an adult. They are survivors, and they have built survival skills that are oftentimes not the most productive or healthy. But keep in mind, they have survived, and they have survived things that most of us on this call can never imagine facing. And so it's so important during this time to get creative with how we connect. And I mean this for all of you, but also with the children that you're working with, doing crafts together. Physical movement is always something that I recommend. Being able to get in nature, teaching meditation skills, teaching those calming skills. Oftentimes those are things that, all children can benefit from these. I've taught all three of mine the calm down techniques. Probably a lot of adults can use those as well. But this is something, especially with children that you're working with, that is so important for them to learn, because they often miss out on that in early childhood. And again, like, their brains are wired to fight. Their brains are wired around everything they've gone through and to protect themselves. And so even when you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, like, they're safe. They have, I'm a good person. I care for them. Like, we're doing all the right things. When you've never had that, it can feel really uncomfortable and unsettling to have that. And, really, I mentioned compassion, and Dr. Brene Brown is another favorite of mine. And, when doing this work, it's really hard because it's our heart's work, and heart work is hard. I remember leaving, and at the end of the day, feeling defeated and feeling like I hadn't gotten anywhere, and dealing with one crisis after another and one behavior after another, and feeling a lot of judgment, because the outside world does not understand what we see every day and what we do every day, and the heaviness of it. And so when I talk about compassion, I don't just mean for our kids that we work with, I mean for ourselves as well, because it is hard. And no matter how close you are to it, whether you're reading the file or you are on the front lines with children, it is heavy. It's heavy to imagine what these children have gone through. It's scary. It's terrifying to not know if you're going to be able to get in and do that work. And to turn things around for them. And so having that compassion for yourself and having that compassion for them is really key in the work that we do. Lowering our expectations, accepting ourselves, knowing that, like, we're all in this together, giving yourself permission to feel overwhelmed. We're wired for struggle, but we are all worthy of love and belonging. And I said that earlier about our children, and that goes for us too. We're going to make mistakes. We're imperfect, but we are wired for that struggle and still worthy of love and belonging. And that's such a huge thing to teach children, is that no matter what, you are still worthy of that love and belonging. It's normal to feel overwhelmed with things that, especially during times like this, maybe with things that didn't used to. Our footing is off. There's a lot of uncertainty. And anytime that happens, we're grasping for that solid foundation, which goes back to what I talked about with building that healthy foundation for children so that we can build upon that. Our brains develop from the bottom up. And, at the bottom is that, primitive, right? And then, at the top is a more sophisticated, but that foundation really has to be built and needs to be solid. And that's where a lot of great therapy can come in to really help children. But bottom line, it's just understanding why, what happened to them, and who was there when it happened. Another thing too is that, I don't want, please hear me, I'm all about having high standards and expectations. But I believe that comes with compassion, and that compassion is not a luxury. We build a solid foundation through that social emotional learning and having adults who understand brain development and child development. And this must live in your bones. Knowledge is great, but it's useless if it doesn't live in your bones, if it's not your true north, so to speak, and it's how you operate. It's just your mode of operation with everyone, having this understanding. And shame, oftentimes a lot of techniques we use with children really are shaming techniques. And in order to avoid shame, we really want to focus on those realistic solutions, not placing blame, and really helping them to talk about those feelings, to name them. Oftentimes, that is something not only children struggle with, but even adults. And helping them develop new coping skills, strengthening skills, creating new pathways there. And helping them understand too that, every behavior is just an emotion waiting to be translated. The emotion is not bad. There's no bad emotions. Our choices and behavior are not always the best or the healthiest. But it is getting to the bottom of what are they trying to communicate? Like, what are they trying to tell us? How can I better translate this in order to help them? And, shifting that viewpoint from, to be so that the viewpoint is what happened to you instead of what is wrong with you. And Bruce Perry talks a lot about that. He and Oprah also just put out a book together, but he talks a lot about this, and how just that shifting that viewpoint can be such a game changer, not just for you all, but definitely for our children that we work with. And it feels different, it's what happened to you and who was there when that happened, and, then what? We're all struggling. I think there's increased stress that has been going on since the start of this pandemic. And we should be prepared for that. And I think for our children who have already experienced extreme stress, this is really, this is a lot for them. And we're seeing increased behaviors and increased meltdowns and increased anxiety in children. We also have the holidays coming up. I like to put this slide in there because holidays can be stressful. They can be sad. We already feel a loss of connection. And I think during the holidays, that's even heightened, especially for our children who are away from family. we've also had other things going on, that grieving a life that we once had. And the reckonings that I mentioned earlier, you know, there is no other army coming. It's that whole, like, if not you, then who? You know, it's not, you know, it's not going to change just by us sitting around hoping it will change. Like, we have to be willing to get in and do the work and change how we're responding, you know, own our part in it. Like, you know, remembering the why, like, why do I do this work? Why is it important to me? Why does my staff do this work? You know, is it, I don't believe people get into this work, or people shouldn't get into this work for a paycheck, or you know, to have a job. This is work that you should have a calling for, and you should have a why. I don't know, maybe that needs to be on the job interview, is, you know, what is your why? Like, why do you want to do this work? Because it's hard, and these children deserve people in every role in your facility who have a why, and who are there because they fully believe in making a difference. Even when things are hard, they are invested in helping these children. And they're compassionate. And that's what we need, more compassion and a collective humanitarian response. This is a quote I like to include. It's from an educator, and it's from a training I did about, you know, what this really meant to him after going through this training. Let me say this, normally I do like a 2 to 3 hour training. So I've probably talked incredibly fast, and I will share this PowerPoint with all of you. But I wanted to get in as much as I could while I had you guys. But, you know, he really talks about how, you know, many of those impairments are directly related to early traumas and stressors or adversity, and that how he viewed those impairments is what changed. Not as a problem, but as the symptom of the real problem. And that was his big takeaway. And it was something that was really moving to me. And so I like to include it in my presentation. And, you know, this just goes back to, like, if not you, then who, right? So, like, well, we can't afford to save this one. But, you know, someone's going to catch them. Like, who is that someone? You know, is it our judicial system? Is it them repeating the cycle with their own children? Gangs? You know, we can't afford to pass children off and just hope that someone else will catch them. And this is another favorite one of mine, and it's, the child who's not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. I feel like we have a lot of people who are burning it down to feel its warmth, but none more so than the children that you all work with. We need our village. We didn't understand how much we did, but we were not meant to go at this alone. Like, we are wired for connection. And we were meant to do life together, and not in isolation. And we weren't meant to handle the burdens and challenges of life by ourselves. And although it may seem as though they don't, I can promise you they absolutely do. They don't know how to accept it sometimes or handle it. It feels uncomfortable, but they want that village. They want to feel that warmth. They just oftentimes go about it in ways that don't look like they do. And this is a slide. This slide I always end with. Apparently, I was always I was destined for this career path. My mom says I had to write a paper in junior high, and that there wasn't Microsoft Word then, so like I actually had to write it with a pen. I'm dating myself then. There, I know. But I had to write about a speech that I felt at that point would influence my life. And this is the one that I picked. This is Theodore Roosevelt's arena speech. And, you know, I didn't know it at the time. I was in the 7th grade, but it really, when I think about this now, I think about how it really has shaped my entire career in my life. And it's also, I have it hanging in my office. I have it hanging in my house. I share it with people all the time because, you know, when you're in the arena getting your butt kicked, it's hard and you're tired. And there's a lot of critics out there. But I encourage you to print this off somewhere and hang it and go back to this on the hard days, on the easy days. Remind yourself that you were in the arena. And so I'm just going to read this to you all really quick. I know you all can read, but I'm going to read it for you real quick. So it says, it's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. None of you on this call belong with those cold and timid souls. Your place is in the arena. You are not sitting in the cheap seats. It is easy to throw criticism and feedback from the cheap seats. It is much harder to be in the arena getting your butt kicked. It's okay to rest when you're in that arena. You need people to lean on, okay? You need people, sometimes we just need to rest because it is hard. But don't for 1 second think that you're not making a difference, because you are. I get texts and email. I get messages from kids that I have not worked with in 10 years. I had a child just recently who found me on Instagram that I removed from his home when he was 14. And when I removed he and his siblings, it looked like a scene out of a concentration camp. They were almost unrecognizable. They looked much younger because they were so malnourished. And it was one of my hardest cases. And they were children who were placed in facilities because they could not thrive in a foster home. They couldn't. And, you know, I was not sure where they ended up. And he reached out to me to let me know that, I'm going to try not to cry, that he is in college. And he said to me, you know, I know our work, I know you were with me for such a brief time, but I want you to know that the way you looked at me is what changed my life, because you never looked at me like I was less than, no matter what crazy stunt I had just done. You held me accountable and you spoke truth into me, but you spoke truth into me with love. And it's been years since I worked with him. And it was very brief, but it's those moments where all of those times where I thought I am probably the worst therapist on the planet, or I am so horrible at my job, I can't do this anymore. It's those moments that remind me that this is what I was built for. This is my calling. This is why I love these children, because it just takes one person and one moment, just one moment, to change a kid's life. So thank you for all that you do every day. I know how hard it is. And, you know, thank all of your staff as well. And thank you, Ebony, for having me on here. I could talk forever, so I think I did okay on time. But like I said, I'm used to usually like 2 hours or more. So I'm going to pat myself on the back for not talking for 2 hours today. But thank you all for what you do every day and for having me on this call. And I wish you well, and go make a difference because I promise you, you are. So thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you so much. I think that message was for me directly, but hey, I hope everyone got something from it. Again, thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it. And so before we let everyone go, we did want to have open discussion to see if there were any questions for Ms. Freshwater or just for PRLU in general. We do have some team members from the regulatory or background check unit also participated in this Zoom. So feel free to ask the question or you can put it in the chat and we may be able to follow up with you. Okay. You're getting some kudos, Audrey. It's a really good presentation.
Oh. I didn't see the chat. Oh.
Okay. Well, everyone, if we do not have any other additional questions, again, thank you for your time. I think we went a little bit over than what we usually do, but thank you for hanging in there. This particular Zoom meeting provider call is being recorded, so it will be available on our website as well. And if you have any other questions, feel free to just let me know. Thank you so much, Audrey.
Thank you all. Y'all have a good
Right.
one.
Everyone have a great weekend.